Hey, what's going on, guys? Realm Gaming here, back with another video. Today's episode, we're taking a look at the Frost Mage Mythic Plus guide for a patch 11.1. If you are not familiar with the channel, we do have a website where we put all of our guides. It's realmgg.com. There's going to be a link in the description of the video. If you want to click it, you can follow along in the guide with us. So all the talents, all that good stuff is going to be on the website. I'm not going to put a link in the description of the video too. I might put a couple things in there, but for the most part, just come to the website. All the information is already here for you. And this guide is kind of made to follow along with the guide. So, go ahead and open the guide and you can kind of follow along with us. So with that being said, let's go ahead and first jump into some of the pros and cons for Mythic Plus for Frost Mage. So one of the things I really like about Frost Mage is it does bring a pretty good damage profile. Now, I will say that Frost Mage is not quite as strong as it has been in previous seasons. They're actually a little bit below Fire Mage. I know Fire Mage is normally played at really high keys, but normally Frost Mage is a little bit better in lower keys where you need a little bit more burst damage. You're not having to play around Combust quite as much. But for the past few seasons, we actually have seen Frost Mage above Fire Mage in a lot of instances, a lot of cases. So yeah, I do think that Frost Mage is warranted some buffs. Hopefully we do see that in the next patch, but don't let that scare you away from playing Frost Mage. It's still really strong. You'll be able to push pretty much any content that you want to push with it. And one of the main reasons that I like to run Mage is due to their Arcane Intellect. They do bring that. It does kind of help your healer out, and they're going to be a little bit better with caster comps. Another thing that's really nice about Mage is we have really good mobility. With Shimmer and Alter Time as well, you're able to... you can really cheese a lot of bosses, just like first boss of Cinderbrew, for example. You can alter time the drinks that you got to send out. And when I am on my Mage, I feel like I have a little bit more freedom to move around rather than my Warlock. I got to stand there and cast at the last second, then just kind of blink out of a swirly or something. I feel like I'm just a little bit more free when I play my Mage. Some more pros. We already talked about Arcane Intellect. We do also have Lust. We have our Time Warp. So again, just a ton of group utility. And we also have all the slows that we bring. We have Spell Steal. We just have a lot working in our kit that really seems to help the group. And that's not really something that's a common theme across all specs. That's one of the reasons I just love to play Mage. They're just always useful. Now, I do have this tier list, A to S tier. I'm going to update this. I don't think they're S tier anymore. I would say they're more like B to A tier. So they're still pretty strong. They're still in a decent spot, but they're not quite as strong as we've seen in previous seasons. Looking into some of the cons here, you do rely on those Frozen Orb procs. So if you do press it at an awkward time, you of course have shifting power to get more CDR on your Frozen Orb if you need it. But there are awkward instances where like you might throw a Frozen Orb out and the tank completely moves the group and your shifting power is on cooldown, and now you can't get your Frozen Orb back for like 45 seconds. And that's really going to hurt your damage profile. Thankfully, though, that's why Frost Mage does have those slows built in to kind of hold that pack in one spot to where it doesn't hurt your damage quite as much. So yeah, you're really reliant on Frozen Orb Blizzard. You don't have any self-sustain, really. Again, you can alter time. It's kind of hard to use, though. You have your Mass Barrier. You get your Ice Barrier. You're really good against burst damage, but you don't have much sustain, unfortunately. We also don't have a really great way to run long distances. We have our Shimmer, and after the Shimmer, we don't have anything to really boost up our speed, unfortunately. So if you do wipe on a boss, a lot of the times you're going to be one of the last specs that gets back to the boss. And then final con here is you can be a little bit comp dependent due to Arcane Intellect not being utilized by, tons of different melee specs like Fury Warrior, whatever. So typically you want to make sure you have at least one other caster with Mage. So next we have our talent. So we have our talent calculator here. I'm not going to necessarily go into that. But, it is there if you want to import. We also have the import string right here as well. These talents are not taken from Wowhead or anything. These are taken directly from Raider.io. I went in and I compared like the top 5 or 6 Frost Mages, and I took the profile that was the most similar between like the top 6. So I did kind of cross-reference Wowhead though, just to make sure that I wasn't, pulling anything crazy here. And this does correlate pretty well. But, for the most part, this is what the high key pushers are running. And a lot of the times you'll see a pretty drastic difference between what's on Wowhead and what, like the top 10 players are running. So that's why I like to go to Raider.io to pull what's current, because a lot of those Wowhead guides were made, several weeks ago. Things change, yada, yada, yada. Going into rotation. So we do have single target and we have AoE priority here. Before we get into that, I do want to go into some general tips first, and I might actually end up moving this general tips above the rotation because it's kind of important to understand this first, in my opinion. But I want to talk about the Shatter combo, and this is basically the combo that treats an enemy as if it were frozen. So if we hover the tooltip here, multiplies the critical strike chance of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5 and adds an additional 50% critical strike chance. So this is one of the reasons that critical strike is so good on Frost Mage is due to Shatter here. Our entire talent tree just synergizes with critical strike really well, and it all kind of funnels into your Shatter. So one of the things that we want to do in our rotation is we want to proc Shatter. So how do we do that? So if we go back up to our rotation here, so if we go back to our Shatter, it says against frozen targets. So what we have to do is we have to apply the frozen effect to get benefit from our Shatter. So one of the main ways you do that is through Flurry here. So Flurry is going to apply something called Winter's Chill. And Winter's Chill, if we just read the bottom of here, Winter's Chill causes the target to take damage from your spells as if it were frozen. So a big part of Frost Mage is applying Winter's Chill to your target and consuming them and using Winter's Chill to buff your other spells. So typically a good thing to do is to go ahead and queue up your Glacial Spike. The way it actually works is typically your Flurry will hit the target before your Glacial Spike. It depends on the distance that you are from the mob and from the boss. But what you can do is queue up a Glacial Spike and you can send it, then Flurry right before it and apply Winter's Chill, and then your Glacial Spike will benefit from that Winter's Chill damage bonus. So the whole idea of Frost Mage is to buff your spells with Winter's Chill. So it's almost like you cast a Flurry, then a spell, then a Flurry, then a spell. Now we do have two things here called Excess Frost and Excess Fire, and if you really want to min-max, you can track this and you can get a little bit more out of some of your spells like Flurry and Comet Storm. So Excess Frost. So if we look at the Frost section here at the top, it's going to say consuming Excess Fire causes your next Flurry to also cast Ice Nova at 150% effectiveness. If you're not sure what Ice Nova does, it basically freezes a whole bunch of mobs. Again, if you can freeze mobs, you benefit from Shatter, so that's really good. And then consuming that Excess Frost, the cooldown of our Comet Storm is reduced by 3 seconds. And then if we look at Excess Fire here, casting Comet Storm causes your next Ice Lance to explode in a Frostfire burst, dealing damage to nearby enemies. And then this will also grant us Brain Freeze. If you're not sure what Brain Freeze is, that's just going to reset the cooldown on our Flurry, essentially. From there, your priority will be Comet Storm, Frozen, or Blizzard. Step 8 here was a little bit bugged. I had to change it. I had Ray of Frost in there, and some builds are running it, but I don't think most builds are running Ray of Frost right now. Your next priority is going to be your Frostfire Empowerment. This is going to make your Frostfire Bolt basically instant cast. You'll want a weak guard to be able to track this. I found one online, and it just popped up the Frostfire icon whenever it's ready to go. You pressed it, went away. Very simple to play around, and it will do a significant portion of your damage. You want to make sure that you're tracking that and utilizing that efficiently, right? You want to get that out so that you're not like proccing it multiple times and wasting charges, essentially. So when that procs, go ahead and send it. You want a shifting power when all your other cooldowns are, when they're on cooldown. You're never really using shifting power for damage. It is mainly just to get your cooldowns back, like Frozen Orb and your Icy Veins. Your next priority is going to be Ice Lance if Winter Chills or Figures of Frost is active, and then if nothing else, just spam Frostfire Bolt. So really, long story short, your single target is send your cooldowns and make sure that you are, I'd say the main part of this is make sure that you're buffing these 3 spells with your Winter's Chill and Flurry. So another talent that we're running is Death's Chill. So this is like a stacking effect. We can read here, damaging an enemy Frostbolt increases spell damage by 1%, stacks up to 15 times. So really what you're wanting to do is to press Icy Veins. This is another weak guard or something else that you'll have to track. But you want to be doing is pressing Icy Veins. You need to be stacking this up to at least 10 stacks and then sending the rest of your rotation. You're going to get a significant burst of damage by stacking this up. And it is kind of awkward to play around at first, but you get used to it pretty quick. Another effect that we have is with our Cone of Cold. So if our previous cast was Comet Storm, then we can Cone of Cold to reset the cooldown on our Comet Storm. Now the catcher here is that Cone of Cold has to hit at least 3 targets. So typically your opener is going to be Icy Veins with Frostfire Bolt spams up to 10 stacks of Death's Chill into a Comet Storm, into a Cone of Cold, and then into another Comet Storm. So after that is sent, Then you'll go into your very first frozen orb, and this is kind of when things start to get crazy. Procs start popping up, and it's kind of hard to know what to do from here. So now the next thing we're going to be looking at is beefing up our Ice Lance with our Comet Storm. So if you remember from Excess Fire, casting Comet Storm causes your next Ice Lance to explode in a burst. So what you want to do is you want to Comet Storm with your Excess Fire and funneling all that burst damage into your next Ice Lance. So again, probably something you want to be tracking. From here, we'll be casting our Blizzard. We'll be casting Comet Storm with our Cone of Cold whenever that comes off cooldown. And then from here, we want to prioritize Glacial Spike. So I said we weren't going to come in here, but we're going to. So Glacial Spike works with something called Splitting Ice. So if we look at the bottom part of this, your Glacial Spike also hits a second nearby target for 100% of its damage. So Glacial Spike is really good for being able to cleave, especially for like priority mobs in an AoE pack, right? There's like 10 mobs, but there's typically like 2 or 3 mobs that have more health than the rest. So you want to be putting your Glacial Spike into those mobs for funnel damage. So when you get those icicles built up, go ahead and send your Glacial Spike. It will hit 2 targets and it'll do a whole bunch of burst damage. From here, again, you want to be pairing your Flurry with your Excess Frost and your Excess Fire. And then you also want to be using your Flurry to apply that Winter's Chill as well. Now, the reason that Flurry kind of comes a little bit later in your AoE rotation versus your single target is because Flurry just applies Winter's Chill to one target. It doesn't apply Winter's Chill to the whole pack. So Winter's Chill is not quite as strong. It's still strong in AoE, don't get me wrong, but it's not something you prioritize quite as much, especially in your opener. From here, again, we'll be tracking that Frostfire Empowerment. We'll be using Shifting Power whenever we're in an awkward spot with our Frozen Orb or our Icy Veins is on cooldown. And then from here, we can focus a little bit more on that Winter's Chill or Fingers of Frost. And if you're not sure what Fingers of Frost is, basically it's the same thing as Winter's Chill, but it only applies to Ice Lance. So when everything else is sent, that's something that you'll be trying to proc and focus on. And then finally, if you don't have any Fingers of Frost or Winter's Chill procs and flurries on cooldown, you can just kind of spam Frostfire Bolt. I will be completely honest with you, though. There's not many times where you're just spamming Frostfire Bolt in AoE. All right, going into consumables here, pretty much every single DPS that I've looked at is taking Flask of Alchemical Chaos. Just gives the most raw throughput through that bonus to secondary stats. We also have Tempered Potion. What I like to do with it is I like to pair this into my Icy Veins. Typically when I'm pressing Icy Veins, it's a big pack or something. So I have a macro and I put those two together. Be careful though, because if you go to like a target dummy and that macro is still active, you're going to be using flasks on target dummies. So you got to be careful with it. Standard Healing Potion. We'll be putting Mana Oil for the crit and haste on our weapon. You can run Augment Runes if you can afford them. Very expensive though. You can run either of these feasts. You can also run, if you just want to buy individual food, the Beladar's Bounty. For your unique gem or your epic gem, this is going to be primary stat and then critical effect per gem color. And then we'll be running a Masterful Emerald as our sort of standard gem in all of our different sockets. All right, then our enchants are going to be Authority of the Depths here. Pretty standard for casters this season. I think most casters, I know I'm running this on my Warlock as well. I think most casters are running this, to be honest. Nothing else too crazy going on with enchants. Some avoidance. We have avoidance on our bracers. On our chest, we're going main stat. On our cloak, we're going avoidance as well. I think we're also going... Okay, no, we're going stamina on the boots. Our Sunset Spell Thread is going to be on our legs here for that main stat and stamina. Haste is going to be on our ring, and then Cursed Haste is going to be on our other ring. All right, let's talk a little bit about our tier set. All right, so we don't have the best tier set in the world. It's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's... I don't think it's very interesting, but I think that's kind of Blizzard's direction and intention with tier sets, is to kind of make them, I don't want to say more boring, but it's not something that they want to be like spending a ton of time balancing around as tier sets. And I don't think they want tier sets to be making a big change to the rotation that you're doing. So they're just not as interesting as they used to be. Just to read it out here, your spells and abilities have a chance to hit Jackpot that fires Frostbolt of volley, dealing damage to your primary target and 20% of that damage up to additional targets. So very good for Mythic Plus. There's a whole bunch of AoE damage. And then when you cast Icy Veins, it always hits a Jackpot. So Icy Veins is going to be very core to our tier set and our 2-piece and also our 4-piece as well. If you read it out here, Icy Veins causes you to hit a Jackpot at 100% effectiveness every 10 seconds for 30 seconds. So Icy Veins will proc this. Basically, it's a guaranteed proc at least 3 times to hit a jackpot when you cast Icy Veins with your 4 set. So I think overall, this tier set kind of skews a little bit more towards AoE than single target, which, to be honest, we probably need more than anything. Our single target, to me, feels to be pretty good. All right, moving on to general tips down here. You know, you're gonna make sure that you're using your shatter combo as much as you possibly can. You're gonna make sure that you're getting that flurry in right before you cast a big spell like a glacial spike. There's really no reason that you should be sending glacial spikes without a flurry in front of it to proc that shatter. We also have cooldowns here. Make sure that you're not... This is just something that I do, but I accidentally send my cooldowns at the end of a pack when it has like 10% health. And that way the next pack, I don't have cooldowns. And sometimes that really hurts my overall. So that's something I'm trying to focus on right now. Is yes, use your cooldowns, but be smart about it. Sometimes it is worth it to hold a cooldown. Don't just always send them. And then finally here, manage procs specific to Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze. Again, you're going to make sure that you're using them. If you don't use your procs, you will overcap on procs essentially, and you're just basically wasting damage if you don't use your procs. All right, let's talk a little bit about stat priority real quick. So let's talk about our mastery really quick. Icicles. So casting Frostbolt or Flurry grants you an icicle. Casting Ice Lance causes all icicles stored to begin launching at the target, each dealing X amount of frost damage. And you can store up to 5 of these icicles, and then excess will be launched individually. Not the best for us specifically. I mean, it's okay if we're running something like Hailstones here, where casting Ice Lance on frozen targets has a chance to generate an icicle. If you are running Hailstones, which we are, it's not bad, but we just get more value with Haste and Critical Strike, to be honest. Haste is going to be really strong for us. It's actually our main secondary stat, because since we are a proc-based spec, the more procs we get, the more damage it will do. And then we also have Critical Strike. We have something called the Shatter Cap, and that is if you reach this threshold on your Critical Strike, this means that all spells that benefit from Shatter will always Critical Strike. But it's not necessarily something that you really want to focus on. For the most part, focus on Haste and Critical Strike in synergy. If you focus on one stat too much in WoW, you get into diminishing returns, and it really does hurt your overall damage. And then, yeah, of course, Intellect, that's going to be your main priority, so eye level really over anything. And then Versatility, not bad for higher keys. It's pretty good for the damage reduction more than anything. So if you guys are struggling to, you know, like heal through a specific boss or a specific mechanic, you know, you might swap on some Versatility gear. Good to have it in your bags just in case. Just kind of hold on to it in case you need it. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. This is my first WoW guide like this. One section that I did leave out that I am going to add to this guide, hopefully before you guys see it, is the embellishment section. I would like to add that to the guide, but outside of that, I think we covered, I don't know, gave it a pretty good run. We might make some changes to it here in the future, but for the most part, if you just go to realmgg.com, you could go to World of Warcraft up here in the top right. You could click Frost Mage. It'll take you directly to the guide. There'll be a link in the description of the video with all the talents, all that good stuff. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next one.